My name is Daniel Bennett. I'm 46 years old, and this is the story of the Christmas when my kids laughed at my simple gift until someone walked in holding the exact same one, and everything changed. If you enjoy real-life stories like mine, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. I've never had much, but I've always tried to give what I could. That's what my father taught me. Son, gifts aren't about money, they're about meaning. But that lesson doesn't translate well in a world where every teenager can compare your entire life to what other parents buy with a single glance on Instagram. My ex-wife, Megan, lives 20 minutes away in a house with granite countertops, a finished basement, and holiday decorations that look like they were pulled straight from a magazine. Her new husband, Travis, is the kind of man who always knows exactly what to buy because he can afford everything. Meanwhile, I work night shifts operating a forklift at a distribution warehouse. It's steady, honest work, but not the kind that fills bank accounts. Some nights, I come home so tired, my bones feel wired shut, but I never complain. I just want Chloe and Max to know they're loved, even if I can't compete with what's under their mom's tree. By mid-December, it was clear this Christmas would be hard. Money was tight, hours at work had been cut, and the kids were dropping hints about things way beyond my reach. Designer sneakers for Max, a new phone for Chloe. I nodded along, smiling, pretending like I wasn't calculating rental payments and overdue utility bills in my head. One night, after a long shift, I stopped at a diner on my way home. My hands were still shaking from the cold as I wrapped them around a cup of burnt coffee. Across the room, an old man sat alone, eating soup and writing in a small, worn notebook. Every so often, he smiled to himself, like he was remembering something worth holding on to. Curiosity got the better of me, and when I paid for my coffee, the waitress smiled. "That's Mr. Harper," she said. "Widower, writes in that journal every day. Says it keeps him grateful, helps him see his life clearly." Grateful, clearly. 2 words I hadn't felt in a long time. When I left the diner, the idea followed me like a shadow. Chloe and Max spent so much of their lives online, capturing moments for strangers, but never for themselves. What if I gave them something that reminded them to look inward, to pay attention, to appreciate the things that couldn't be posted or liked? The thought terrified me. My kids were used to shiny gifts, real gifts, the kind that came in boxes with logos. But this might matter, or it might backfire spectacularly. Still, the idea stuck. The next day, I stopped by a small bookstore I'd passed 1,000 times but never gone inside. The bell over the door jingled softly. Shelves leaned with age, and the warm smell of paper and dust filled the air. The owner, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and kind eyes, approached me, looking for something special. "I need Christmas gifts," I said. "Something meaningful, something they'll remember." But I rubbed the back of my neck. "I don't have a lot to spend." She studied me for a moment, then walked to a back shelf and pulled out 2 simple journals, cloth-bound, sturdy, blank pages waiting for a story. "They're plain," she said, "but sometimes the plainest things hold the most truth." I hesitated. "My kids are teenagers. They're used to bigger." She smiled. "What they're used to isn't always what they need." I bought the journals, $10 each. Even that stung my wallet, but I felt strangely hopeful. Like maybe this Christmas could be different. Maybe it could be about meaning instead of money. At home, I wrapped the gifts carefully with the nicest paper. I had silver with little snowflakes. I placed them under my small, slightly crooked tree and stared at them with a knot in my stomach. They might laugh, they might be disappointed, but at least they would know I tried to give them something with heart. Christmas morning always felt bittersweet. Megan and Travis gave their gifts early, so by the time Chloe and Max arrived at my place, they were already buzzing with excitement. Max had a new gaming headset. Chloe had a tablet. They came in laughing, comparing presents, glowing with the thrill of it all. I tried to match their energy. "I've got something for you both," I said brightly. "Something I hope you'll use all year." Chloe raised an eyebrow. Max grinned. They sat on the couch and reached for the gifts I'd wrapped. My heart thudded. "Go on," I said. "Open them." They tore into the paper, and for a moment the anticipation was electric. Then the laughter started, not cruel, but confused, surprised, disappointed. "Dad," Chloe said, trying to hide a smile. "It's a notebook." Max flipped through his palettes. "It's empty." I forced a smile. "It's for writing things you want to remember. Thoughts, plans, gratitude, your life." They exchanged a look, the kind teenagers give when something feels old-fashioned, out of touch. But before I could feel the full sting of their disappointment, a knock came at the door. A soft, unexpected knock, and the person standing on the other side changed everything. I didn't recognize the silhouette at first. A figure bundled in a long coat, snow dusting their shoulders, breath rising in faint clouds. Chloe and Max paused mid-laugh, turning toward the doorway. I felt my stomach tighten as I opened it. A woman stood there, mid-30s, dark hair pulled back, eyes warm but nervous, and in her hands she held a small, wrapped package, identical to the ones I'd just given my kids. Silver paper, snowflake design, same size, same weight. "Daniel Bennett?" she asked softly. I blinked. "Yes. Can I help you?" She smiled, shaky, emotional. "I've been looking for you for over a year." I wasn't sure this was the right address until I saw the truck outside. My heart kicked into a strange rhythm. "I'm sorry, do we know each other?" Behind me, Chloe whispered, "Dad, who is that?" The woman exhaled, steadying herself. "My name is Sarah Harper." She stepped inside the light, and there it was, the familiarity I couldn't place earlier. The same last name I'd heard in that diner weeks ago. And then it hit me. The old man with the worn notebook. The man who wrote every day. The man I'd helped all those years ago. Sarah's voice softened. "You helped my father." I swallowed. "Your father? Was he the man whose car spun off the bridge in the ice storm?" she finished for me. "The night the tow company said they couldn't come for hours. The night you climbed down that embankment alone in freezing rain and stayed with him until help arrived. You kept him awake. You kept him alive." My hands went numb. I hadn't thought about that night in years. I didn't know the man's name. I only remembered the terror in his eyes, the way he clutched my arm, the way he whispered he didn't want to die alone. Sarah's eyes glistened. "He passed away in October." A quiet ache filled my chest. Before I could respond, she reached into her coat and pulled out the small, wrapped package. "He left this for you." Chloe and Max exchanged startled looks. I stepped aside. "Come in, please." She crossed the threshold, glancing at my kids with a gentle smile. "I'm sorry to interrupt your Christmas. I just needed to deliver this today," he insisted. I took the package with careful hands. It felt strangely heavy despite its size. "Sarah continued, before he died, my father told me the story again. Every detail. He said, you saved his life in that storm. Not just by climbing down to him, but by filling the long, cold minutes with conversation so he wouldn't fall asleep. He said, you talked about your kids, how much you loved them. My throat tightened. I didn't think he remembered that. He remembered everything, she whispered, especially that part. Chloe and Max were listening, no really listening. Their phones forgotten. Max even sat up straighter. Sarah nodded. He kept one of those every year. He said life was too precious to rush through. That's why he wanted you to have his final one. My eyes widened. This is his. She nodded. He filled it, every page. The last entry is the day before he died. And the last line is about you. Chloe gasped softly. Max froze. I swallowed hard. Why today? Sarah smiled sadly. Because he said Christmas was the day you gave him another chance at life. He said you deserved to know that your kindness didn't end on that roadside. It changed everything for him. My kids stared at me, disbelief cracking through their earlier laughter. I wasn't sure I could speak, but I tried. Please, sit. Can I get you anything? She shook her head. I also wanted you to meet someone. She stepped back toward the door and motioned outside. A boy stepped forward, 12 years old, shy, wearing a knitted hat pulled low. He held something pressed to his chest. Another journal. This is my son, Owen, Sarah said. Dad raised him like a second father, and he taught him to write something every day the same way he did. Owen looked at my kids nervously. My grandpa said, writing helps you grow up slower, in a good way. Chloe lowered her eyes to the journal she'd just mocked. Max swallowed hard, tracing the spine of his own. Sarah touched Owen's shoulder. He wanted Owen to give your kids this message, in person. Owen cleared his throat, voice quiet but steady. He said, the gift looks simple, but what you put inside it could change your whole life. Silence flooded the room, thick, emotional. Chloe blinked fast, glancing at me, not embarrassed, not annoyed, just seeing me for the first time. Sarah stepped closer and gently touched the journal in my hands. He wrote about you, Daniel, about the way you held his hand so he wouldn't be alone. He said you were the kind of man who gave quietly, the kind the world doesn't thank enough. I felt heat rise behind my eyes. Sarah continued softly, and he wanted your kids to know exactly who their father is. Chloe covered her mouth. Max stared at me like I was someone he didn't recognize but wanted to. The journals suddenly didn't look so simple anymore, and Sarah's next words changed everything. He said the world measures value in money, but real worth, that's measured in moments, in courage, in kindness. She smiled through tears. And he said you have more of that than anyone he ever met. My kids went silent, and for the first time I felt something shift in the room. They weren't laughing anymore. They were learning who I'd always been. The living room had gone quiet, so quiet I could hear the faint ticking of the old wall clock above the mantel. The journals my kids had laughed at minutes earlier now lay in their laps like something fragile, delicate, and impossibly meaningful. I hadn't planned any of this. I didn't even know Mr. Harper had remembered my name, let alone my kids. Yet here stood his daughter and grandson, delivering what felt like a message from a different lifetime. Sarah took a slow breath, steadying herself. There's something else, she said softly. Something my father wanted your children to hear, not from me, from him. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. The edges were creased, softened by time. He wrote this the week after the accident, she said. He carried it with him for years. It took him a long time to decide whether he should send it. By the time he made up his mind, he didn't have the strength to make the trip. Her eyes met mine with quiet sorrow. I nodded, unable to speak. She handed the paper to Chloe, who unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was shaky but careful. Chloe read aloud, "To the father who saved my life. You don't know me, but you sat with me through the longest night of my life. You cared for me like someone you'd known forever. You talked about your children with pride and love. You held my hand when I was afraid to close my eyes. You gave me another Christmas. You gave me more years with my family. I hope someday I can repay you. If not to you, then to your children." Chloe's voice trembled. Max leaned forward, eyes wide, absorbing every word. She continued, "If your kids ever forget who you are, remind them. Heroes don't always fly or tear down doors. Sometimes they climb through storms quietly and save strangers without expecting anything back." My breath caught. Chloe's voice cracked at the final line. "Your father is one of those men." She lowered the page slowly, blinking through tears. Max reached out a hand to touch my arm, hesitant but certain. "Dad," he whispered, "you did all that." I tried to answer, but the words tangled somewhere deep inside me. So instead, I nodded. "Yeah, but it was a long time ago." Sarah stepped forward gently. "Not long enough to forget. Not long enough for your kids to grow up without knowing the truth." The kids exchanged a look, one heavy with realization. Max clutched his journal to his chest. Chloe held the letter like it was holy. Then Chloe spoke softly. "We didn't know. I didn't expect you to know," I said. "I never wanted you to think of me differently. I just wanted you to have good lives." "But Dad," Chloe said, voice shaking, "we made fun of your gift. That doesn't matter." "It does," she insisted. "We didn't understand what you were trying to give us." Max nodded, swallowing hard. "We were really mean." I felt something soften inside me, something that had been tight and aching for months. Sarah glanced around the room, taking in the tree, the worn couch, the humble decorations. "Your father taught my dad something important that night," she said. "He taught him that ordinary people can be extraordinary, that one act of kindness can change the direction of someone else's entire life." Owen stepped closer to Max. "My grandpa wrote about you guys, too. He said your dad talked about you the whole time, said you were talented and creative, and that he was proud of you." Max blinked rapidly. "He did." Owen nodded. "A lot." Chloe looked down at her journal again, running her fingers over the cover. "Dad, can you show me how you write in yours?" "Mr. Harper's daughter said he did it every night." I smiled softly. "Of course. And can we maybe write something together tonight?" she asked hesitantly. My chest tightened. "Yeah, I'd love that." Then Max looked at me with something I hadn't seen in a long time, full, open admiration. "Dad, I want to start today, right now." Before I could answer, Sarah cleared her throat gently. "Before we go, there's one last thing." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook. Its cover was cracked, soft with years of use. This was my father's final journal. He wanted you to have it. I stared at the book, afraid to touch it, as if it might crumble in my hands. "I don't know if I can." "You can," she said firmly, "because you inspired it." I finally took it. The weight of it settled into my palms like something sacred. Chloe and Max watched in reverent silence. Owen stepped beside his mother. My grandpa said that every time he felt scared, he remembered your voice. He said if you could climb through that storm to help him, then he could face anything. I felt myself exhale shakily. Sarah offered a final smile. Merry Christmas, Daniel. Thank you for giving us 16 more years with him. And with that, she and Owen turned toward the door. But before stepping outside, Sarah looked back once more. Your kids have a good father, she said. They just learned it the way some truths are learned slowly, and then all at once. The door closed softly behind them. Inside, the silence was different now. Warmer, heavier, full of everything we hadn't said yet. Chloe wiped a tear with the back of her hand. Dad, can we talk? Max nodded. Yeah, like, really talk. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Hope. The house felt heavier after Sarah and Owen left, but not in the lonely way it had felt that morning. This heaviness was different, like the air had filled with something important that finally had space to breathe. Chloe and Max weren't rushing to their phones, weren't scrolling, weren't laughing awkwardly anymore. They sat close together on the couch, each holding their journal like it was a fragile truth they didn't know how to carry. I sat across from them, unsure where to begin. Part of me wanted to pretend everything was okay, smooth the moment over. Another part wanted to curl up and hide from all the emotions that had been stirred open. But the biggest part, the father in me, knew this was a moment I couldn't let slip away. Chloe wiped her eyes again. Dad, why didn't you ever tell us about that night? Max nodded, leaning in. Yeah, you always said being a forklift operator was all you ever did. I exhaled slowly. Because I didn't want my past to be a burden. The accident that happened during the storm, it took a lot from me. My back, my nerves, my career. I didn't want you to growing up feeling sorry for me. Chloe frowned. But we didn't even know. That was the point, I said softly. I didn't want my pain to become your story. Max traced the edge of his journal. But it is our story. You saved someone. You're like a hero. The word hit me like a soft blow. I'd never considered myself that. In fact, after the injury, I'd spent years believing the opposite, that I wasn't enough, that my life had shrunk into something smaller and quieter than what I wanted for them. I'm not a hero, I said gently. I'm just someone who tried to help when he could. Chloe shook her head. That's what heroes say. Before I could respond, a car pulled up outside. I glanced out the window to see Megan's SUV. She hadn't said she was coming by. Great. The last thing I needed was a confrontation. The door opened without a knock. Classic Megan, and she stepped in, her expression tense. Kids, are you here? I've been trying to reach. She stopped mid-sentence when she saw their faces. And then she saw the journals. What's going on? She asked, brow knitting with suspicion. Chloe stood up slowly, gripping her journal with both hands. Mom, Dad gave us these journals, and she looked at me, seeking permission. I nodded. Sarah Harper came over with her son, and she told us what Dad did, about saving her father in the storm. Megan blinked, taken aback. Oh, that night. Chloe folded her arms. You knew. Megan hesitated. But he asked me not to make a big deal of it. I respected that. I looked at her, surprised. She'd never brought it up again, never used it against me, never spun it into something shiny. Maybe a small part of Hertha, part from before our marriage fell apart, had kept that story safe. Max stood, too. Why didn't anyone tell us? Megan sighed. Because your father didn't want to be defined by that night. He wanted to be defined by being your dad. Something stung in my chest, not painful, but tender. Chloe's voice softened. Mom, we made fun of his gifts. Megan looked at me sharply, as if the guilt fell on her shoulders too. Daniel, I'm sorry. The kids get carried away around Christmas. Travis buys too much. I should have talked to them. It's not your fault, I said quietly. They're kids. They learn from what they see. Chloe sank onto the couch. We didn't see anything, not the important stuff. Megan stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Well, maybe now you do. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, it was settling, grounding, like dust finding a home. After a moment, Megan glanced at her watch. I was going to take them for our Christmas Eve dinner, but I think they should stay here tonight. She looked at Chloe, then Max. You two okay with that? Both nodded without hesitation. Megan nodded once, understanding. All right, I'll tell Travis. I'll talk to you later, Daniel. There was no tension in her voice, no sharpness, just sincerity. When she left, Chloe sat back down, wiping a final tear. Dad, can we start writing now? Max opened his journal to the first blank page. Yeah, but can you tell us more first? About Mr. Harper, about the storm, about everything. I leaned back, letting out a breath I'd been holding for years. I can tell you anything you want. How about we start with that night? They nodded eagerly. So I told them, slowly, carefully, honestly. I told them about climbing down the icy embankment, the rain stinging my face, the fear in Mr. Harper's eyes. I told them about singing badly on purpose, just to keep him awake. I told them how we joked about terrible hospital food while waiting for rescue. And as I spoke, they wrote brief notes, impressions, little pieces of the story they wanted to remember. The journals were no longer simple gifts, they were beginnings, new ones. When I finally finished, Chloe whispered, Dad, this is the best Christmas ever. Max nodded. Yeah, we'll never forget this. And in that moment, watching my kids write the first honest entries of their lives, I felt something settle inside me. The kind of peace that only comes from being seen, really seen, maybe for the first time.
That night felt different from any Christmas Eve we'd had since the divorce. No rushing, no comparing, no splitting time between houses, just the three of us sitting together under the soft glow of the crooked tree, our journals open, pages waiting. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was warm, almost sacred. Chloe sat cross-legged on the floor, pen poised. Max sprawled on his stomach, his journal open in front of him. I watched them, not writing yet, just thinking, really thinking, something they didn't do often enough in a world that never stopped moving. Dad, Max asked suddenly, what did you write about when you first started? Like, your very first entry? I smiled, leaning back in my chair. I wrote about you, both of you, the night Chloe was born and the night we brought Max home from the hospital. Chloe looked up. Really? Of course, I said. Those were the nights everything changed for me. She lowered her gaze, her voice softer than before. Can we read them someday? The question wrapped around my heart like a warm blanket. Yeah, I said, someday, sure. For the first time all evening, Chloe wrote something quickly, like the thought had been waiting for her. A few minutes passed before she looked up again. Dad, did you ever wish your life had turned out differently? You know, without the injury, without losing your old job. I took a breath. Yeah, sometimes I miss who I used to be, but I wouldn't change the part that made me your father. The hard parts shaped me, sure. But they also made me appreciate you two more than anything. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. Max tapped his pen against the page. Do you think we can change too? Like, become better? You already are, I said. Tonight proves that. We fell into a peaceful rhythm after that quiet writing, soft talking. It felt like stitching together pieces of ourselves that had been loose for too long. Just before midnight there was a soft knock on the door. I froze. Chloe looked up. More visitors. Max scrambled to his feet, excited. Maybe it's Owen again. But when I opened the door, I found no one on the porch, only an envelope resting against the step, edges dusted with snow. I picked it up, heart thudding, and stepped inside again. Chloe leaned over my shoulder. What is it? I opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a single photograph, Mr. Harper standing beside a Christmas tree, smiling widely, holding a small journal in his hands. On the back, in Sarah's handwriting, were 6 simple words. He wanted you to have this. I felt my breath catch. Chloe touched the photo gently. Dad. He looked so happy. He was, I whispered. He had a full life. Max frowned. But he still remembered you. Some people, I said, we never forget, even if we meet them for only a few hours. Chloe nodded slowly, like she was absorbing something deeper than the words themselves. Max handed me his journal. Dad, can you read my first entry? I hesitated. Are you sure? He nodded. I read the page carefully. His handwriting was messy, rushed, emotional. Today I found out my dad is stronger than I ever knew. He saved someone because he couldn't imagine leaving them alone. I want to be like that when I grow up. I want to be like him. My throat tightened. I didn't trust my voice. Chloe gently took her journal and handed it over next. You can read mine too. Her handwriting was smaller. Neater but shaky with emotion, the entry said. I laughed at my dad's gift today. I wish I hadn't. I didn't understand what he was trying to give me, a way to see myself, a way to slow down, a way to remember who we are. He saved a man's life once. Tonight he saved mine too. I don't ever want to forget this night. I set the journal down, overwhelmed. Chloe leaned against me, her head on my shoulder, something she hadn't done in years. Max wrapped his arm around my other side. For the first time in so long, I didn't feel like the parent who had less to offer. I felt like enough, more than enough. We stayed like that for a long time, holding on to each other as the clock moved closer. To midnight, when the first snow of Christmas morning finally began falling outside, Max whispered, Dad, thank you for tonight, for everything. Chloe nodded, tears gathering again. Yeah, thank you for giving us something we didn't know we needed. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of all the years between us finally settle, not heavy but peaceful. I'm proud of you both, I said softly, more than you'll ever know. And as the snow drifted quietly past the window, I felt something inside me shift, like a door closing gently on old hurts, making room for something new. This Christmas hadn't been the one I'd planned. It was better, because my kids finally saw who I was, not perfect, not wealthy, not flashy, just a father who loved them enough to give them the simplest gift of all, a way to remember what matters. And that was the gift they would carry long after the lights came down.